He signed the surrender papers before anyone could stop him, and that single signature was the first crack in a lie the family had spent decades perfecting. For 23 years, Wren Ashworth was the heir nobody claimed, locked out of birthdays, erased from portraits, quietly groomed to disappear the moment his adopted brother was ready to take his place. Everyone in that hall expected him to beg. Instead, he asked one calm question about unpaid taxes, and three princes who had never once looked at him twice suddenly couldn't look away. Rings burned against skin. Royal commands failed to land. Somewhere beneath the estate, something ancient woke up, hungry for a name. What exactly had this family built him to uncover, and why were they so afraid of him finding it? This is the story of Wren Ashworth. The heir his family tried to trade away like a bad investment, and the quiet, devastating way he made them regret it. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who should have loved you for free, we want to hear about it in the comments. Cast. For quick reference, Ezra Kane, the transmigrated soul, formerly a Chicago fraud auditor, now lives inside Wren Ashworth 23. The neglected Omega heir. Alistair and Cressida Ashworth are Wren's father and mother. Odalis Ashworth is his grandmother and the architect of the family's crimes. Corwin is the adopted heir raised in Wren's place. The three royal brothers of House Valen are Thorn-Crown Prince, cold and legal-minded, Bastion the royal commander, huge and steady, and Rhys the charming diplomat. The kingdom itself is called Vaerith. There is a stranger in the mirror, and apparently I'm wearing his face. Two servants are lacing me into a silver ceremonial coat while I stand there doing the only thing I know how to do under pressure. Processing. Not long ago hours. Though the exact count is already getting slippery, I was Ezra Kane, forensic auditor, dead on the floor of a Chicago parking structure with a security guard's radio crackling somewhere above me. Now I'm sewn into the skin of a 23-year-old Omega named Wren Ashworth, and the memories that came with the body feel less like a life and more like a stack of eviction notices. Locked dining room doors. A birthday cake carried past his bedroom into someone else's. His mother's voice calling him fragile the way other mothers say, sweetheart. A boy standing outside a sealed hall in the rain, apologizing to a door for a crime nobody would name. 3 hours. That's all the body gave me, 3 hours of borrowed memory. And every minute of it hurts like a paper cut you keep finding by accident. The servants won't meet my eyes. Under the edge of the dressing table, tucked beneath a jewelry case like something to be ashamed of, I find 4 tax delinquency notices stamped in red. Interesting. The chandeliers in this house cost more than my old annual salary. And somebody's been hiding unpaid taxes behind the sun nobody claims to love. I checked the ledger with Wren's name on the account. The balance is a rounding error. Congratulations to me. I've inherited a beautiful face, an empty bank account, and a family of very well-dressed liars. Back in my old life, we called that a Tuesday. I spend the walk from the dressing room to the hall doing rapid triage on a life I didn't sign up for. 23 years of memory condensed into 3 hours means I know the shape of the grief, but not the texture of the days that built it. I know Wren was starved of affection the way I know a company was insolvent from a single balance sheet. In outline, not in blood. That gap should worry me more than it does. Instead, I catalog it, file it, and keep moving. Because moving is the only skill that survived the transfer intact. The ceremony hall smells like old money and fresh nerves. Hundreds of nobles packed into silver and velvet. Every important bloodline in the kingdom of Vaerith crammed under one roof to watch a boy get erased. My father, Alistair Ashworth, stands at the dais looking like a portrait commissioned of himself. Beside him waits Corwin, the adopted heir 22, polished to a mirror shine, a scent of white peach drifting off him like a standing apology. And at the head of the room sit 3 men I was not remotely warned about. This body notices them before my brain catches up. The eldest black cedar and cold smoke watches me the way winter watches a lake, waiting to see if it'll hold weight. The largest one leather, fur. Warm iron shifts his stance when I stumble on the ceremonial steps, like his body voted to catch me before his brain signed off on the motion. The last one, amber and burnt orange. All easy charm is mid-flirtation with a diplomat's daughter and forgets his own sentence when I glance his way. My pulse jumps. I file the reaction under inconvenient occupational hazard and keep walking. Then my grandmother rises. O'Dalley's Ashworth, wrapped in gray silk, elegant as a blade laid on a velvet cushion. She announces, sudden as a verdict, that Corwin is to be named the official Ashworth heir. The crowd gasps on cue, a room full of people hungry to watch a discarded Omega break in public. O'Dalley smiles gently and says that Corwin earned the love Wren only ever demanded. The old Wren would have shattered right there on the marble. I feel his grief sitting in my chest like a bruise that belongs to somebody else. But I'm not him. Not exactly. A steward presents a document surrendering my inheritance claim. I read it twice, because I read everything twice. And then I ask the room full of predators one question. Does giving up the inheritance also erase my legal liability for the estate's unpaid taxes? The silence that follows is gorgeous. Somewhere in the crowd, a wine glass stops halfway to a mouth. O'Dallas's smile flickers like a candle catching a draft. My father's face turns a color no family portrait will ever capture. He orders me to kneel, voice booming across the marble, the way it must have boomed across this boy's entire childhood. My knees actually bend an inch muscle memory. Years of training this body never chose. I straighten them slowly, one vertebra at a time. And hear myself say it out loud. I already died once this week. I'm not spending my second life on the floor. I sign. No hesitation. No ceremony, just ink. And something strange rolls through the hall. Relief from my family. Confusion from the crowd. And from the three men at the dais. Something sharp and electric. Like I just tripped an alarm, only alphas can hear. The eldest one stands. His voice drops into that layered register built to bend an Omega's spine. And he orders me to remain. The command hits my body like a palm pressed flat between my shoulder blades. My legs shake. My scent glands burn. I keep walking anyway. One step. Another. The command breaks against my back and dies on the marble floor. His expression cracks open into something that has clearly never happened to him before. And I'll admit it, it looks good on him. Here's what I understand about this family after exactly 3 hours inside it. The most dangerous households aren't the ones that scream their contempt. They're the ones that keep a person close enough to be useful, starved just enough to stay, always dangling love, one good performance away. That isn't neglect. That's a farming operation. Behind me, my signature refuses to dry. The ink glows silver, then gold, light crawling through the letters of a name I've owned for 3 hours. Corwin appears at my elbow, pale as his own scent, and whispers through frozen lips that I wasn't supposed to sign willingly. Across the hall, all three men flinch at once, hands snapping to their signet rings like the metal just turned to fire against their skin. I keep walking because that's my entire personality now. Then the floor moves, not shaking, pulsing. A slow, deep beat rolling up through the marble, through my boots, through my ribs. Like the estate has a heartbeat and it just woke up hungry. A voice slides into my skull, ancient and satisfied, speaking to me and only me. The rightful heir has surrendered his name. The vault opens in 9 days. I stop at the doors. 9 days. I don't even know where the bathrooms are yet. I pack like a man who's about to be audited. Which is to say, correctly. Back in Wren's cold little room, I take only what the law calls legally his 2 plain coats. Worn boots, a comb missing 3 teeth. I leave the expensive clothing hanging there like a row of broken promises, because every thread of it belongs to the estate, and I refuse to owe these people so much as a button. The one strange thing I take is an ugly leather ledger shoved to the back of the wardrobe, because inside the cover, in a child's careful handwriting, someone practiced writing Wren Ashworth over and over, like he was trying to convince himself he existed. My mother finds me while I'm buckling the bag. Cressida Ashworth, beautiful the way frost is beautiful, stands in the doorway waiting for an apology she's certain is coming. I ask her one question instead. Does she want me as a son? Or does she just need my signature changed on some paperwork? Her mouth opens. Nothing comes out. 30 years of managing this household, and she can't manage one honest sentence. I pick up my bag and walk past her, and she doesn't reach for me. And somehow that answers the question better than words ever could. The surrender document. in its rush to erase me, granted me one piece of property the family considered garbage, a townhouse in the old district. I find it at dusk. Half the windows are cracked. The parlor has a puddle with real ambitions of becoming a pond. I stand in the doorway, take in the sagging staircase, and fall completely in love because every door in this house locks from the inside. Rich people buy privacy and lock their own doors from the inside. Discarded Omegas inherited. I decide, standing in that ruined doorway, that this is the best trade I've made since arriving in this body, and possibly the best trade this body has ever made at all. I spend the evening cleaning and narrating my new life to an audience of dust. I inform a dying houseplant that it's the most emotionally available member of my family. I congratulate the pantry's sealed jars of preserved food for outperforming my parents in the category of providing for me. Under the kitchen floorboards, I find a hidden room, small and dry, lined with empty shelves and one old chair facing the wall. I decide, very deliberately, not to think about who sat there or why. Then I touch the ledger properly for the first time, bare palm flat against the leather, and the world splits open. Threads of silver and gold pour out of the book like light-grown veins. They wrap my wrist and drag me into a memory that isn't mine. I'm standing in a study I've never entered, watching O'Dalley's trace figures across this same ledger. Voice smooth as she explains to my father that the estate's debt has grown past saving, and that the old solution remains the only solution. The memory shifts. My father's voice comes through flat and almost bored the tone people use when cruelty has become routine. The biological heir needs to stay hungry for approval. Hungry children sign anything. The threads release me. I'm on my knees on my own kitchen floor, nose bleeding, skull ringing, and something is missing. There used to be a diner in Chicago, a little place I ate at every Friday for 6 years, and its name is gone. Not forgotten. Removed. The shelf where it lived in my head is wiped clean, so the magic reads objects, and it charges memories for the privilege. Every power in this world comes with an invoice. I'd almost respect the honesty, if it weren't robbing me specifically. The pattern, once I bother to notice it, is at least consistent. The deeper the vision pulls me, the more it takes. A glance at a payment stamp costs me something small and forgettable. A full memory, like this one, costs me something I'll miss for the rest of my life. Good to know. Auditors respect a predictable fee schedule, even a cruel one. Near midnight, I find a box wedged behind the hidden room's chair. Inside are 23 sealed envelopes, addressed in handwriting that ages year by year. From crayon to careful ink. Birthday cards, written by Wren, addressed to his own mother, his own father, his own grandmother. Happy birthday. From your son. Every single one unopened. Someone collected them before they were ever delivered, all 23 years of them, and buried them in the dark like evidence. I sit on the floor of my flooded townhouse holding a dead boy's unanswered love. And, for a long time, I don't make a single joke. I think, instead, about every client I ever sat across a conference table from who insisted their family's finances were fine. Actually, everything is fine, and how often fine turned out to mean exactly this: a locked box of proof that nobody was ever going to open on their own. The scents reach me before the footsteps do. Cedar and cold smoke, leather and fur, amber and burnt orange. My body responds like a struck bell, warmth rolling straight down my spine. And that reaction makes me furious, because this is my house, my one locked door kingdom, and my own instincts are opening the gates without my permission. I watch from the upstairs window as 3 men walk up my ruined street, like the neighborhood insulted them personally. I flip the ledger open just to steady myself, and the threads stir faintly, showing me a payment record buried in the estate's accounts. Gold moved quietly from the Ashworth coffers into the royal treasury, authorized under the seal of the late king. The next page is worse. A list of names, all Omega children, all marked missing. Dates stretching back decades. One name near the bottom has been struck through with a single clean line, and written beside it in fresher ink is its replacement, Corwin Ashworth. The pounding on my door rattles the whole frame. A voice comes through the wood formal. Cold announcing that Wren Ashworth is under royal investigation for magical interference. I look at my broken front step. I look at the glowing book full of stolen children. I look at the door standing between me and three alphas whose rings I apparently set on fire. I lean against the frame and answer sweetly through the wood. Investigators usually bring warrants. Suitors bring flowers. You appear to have brought neither. The pounding stops. Then, very quietly, I hear one of them laugh. Thorn, the eldest, tries the handle like it owes him loyalty. It doesn't turn, because I locked it. Because locks are my love language. He announces through the wood that royal authority supersedes private property. I open the door 6 inches, look up into that carved winter face, breathe in a distracting amount of black cedar, and inform him that royal authority can supersede my property the moment it produces paperwork. Then I close the door on the crown prince of the realm. The silence on the other side has texture. Somewhere behind him, someone starts laughing and doesn't stop. What I fail to account for is the kitchen. 20 minutes later, I'm back at the stove. Shirt abandoned over a chair because the fires turned the room into a furnace. Stirring soup like a man who's earned it. And that's when the largest alpha I've ever seen steps silently through my kitchen window like a burglar with excellent posture. Bastion, apparently checking the property for threats, and finding instead a half-dressed Omega armed with a wooden spoon. Our scents collide in the small, hot room, honey and lime, crashing into leather and warm iron, and I watch a royal commander forget how lungs work. His eyes drop, Bonsi, involuntarily, then snap to the ceiling with the discipline of a man defusing a bomb. He turns fully around and apologizes to my wall. I tell the wall he's forgiven, then hand him bowls to carry. Because if men are going to break into my house, they're going to help set the table. Reese comes through the front door while I'm getting dressed, all amber charm and lazy smiles, opening with a line about fate delivering him to my doorstep. I hand him a broom instead and inform him that fate wants my floor swept. He blinks at the broom. Blinks at me. Then he rolls up silk sleeves worth more than my townhouse and actually sweeps, grinning the entire time like I've handed him a gift. Thorn arrives last, through the front door like a civilized person, holding a warrant with the expression of a man laying down a winning hand. I read it at the table while all three watch. Then I read it again, slower, marking errors with a soup-slicked finger. Wrong district seal. My status listed as heir, which, thanks to their own document, I legally am not. No countersignature from the magistrate. 3 procedural errors. I slide it back across the table and tell the future king of the realm to rewrite it. And that penmanship counts. The muscle in his jaw could crack walnuts. Then they accuse me. Thorn lays it out coldly how their rings burned the moment I signed. How their instincts have been wrecked since the ceremony. How I'm the only new variable in the kingdom. I thinks I've bewitched them. I tell him the truth instead, which is worse. Something under that estate woke up when I signed. Something my family built. HID. And fed. And I refuse to accept blame for machinery I was never allowed to see. Keeping me ignorant was the job description. Han doesn't like that answer. So he reaches for the old tool. The command rolls out of him, layered and heavy, ordering me to tell him everything. My knees soften. Heat crawls up my neck. I step into it instead of away. Close enough to feel his breath stutter. Close enough to watch the frost melt. And I tell him quietly that commands aren't a substitute for a personality. His control doesn't just slip, it falls down a flight of stairs. His scent floods dark and hungry through the kitchen. And, for one heartbeat, the Ice Prince looks starving. Then I make my mistake. His ring sits on his clenched hand, gold and humming, and my curiosity has always outrun my survival instinct. I touch it. The threads erupt, silver and gold and violent, and drag me under. I'm small, hiding beneath an oak tree with 3 boys, all of us children, rain hammering the leaves. The tallest wraps his coat around my shoulders. The broad one stands guard, facing outward. The smiling one holds my hand and whispers that they won't let anyone take me. The memory is torn at the edges, burned like a photograph pulled out of a fire. These 3 knew me. These 3 protected me. And judging by the blank confusion on their faces every time they look at me now, Not one of them remembers it. Whatever erased that afternoon from 3 royal minds did a cleaner job than the ledger ever manages on me. No bleeding nose. No missing diner name. Just a smooth, seamless gap where a childhood should be. Someone didn't want them remembering the boy under the tree. That's a more frightening thought than anything O'Dalis has said out loud so far. The vision drops me. The floor rushes up, but the floor never arrives. Because Bastian moves faster than something his size should move. And I land against a chest like a heated wall. Blood runs from my nose onto his sleeve. This enormous alpha, holding my entire weight like it's nothing, goes still and asks, in a low, careful voice, whether he has my permission to keep holding me. My whole ruined family never once asked me a question that gentle. Yes, I tell him, temporarily. Han nods like I've handed down a royal decree. Across the room, Reese has gone pale, staring at nothing, murmuring that he knows that oak tree that he's dreamed about it for years. Bastian, reading over the ledger I left open, finds military transport markings written beside the names of the missing children, and stops breathing entirely. And Thorn stares at his own ring, where letters have surfaced in the gold, spelling out a childhood nickname for me that no living person should know. Then he looks up, and lawyer meets lawyer across my kitchen table. My inheritance surrender, he says, is legally incomplete. The document requires the signature of every person bound to the Ashworth heir. I pull out my copy. Beneath my glowing name, 3 new signature lines have appeared. Each one bears a prince's seal. Absolutely not. I tell them. When Thorn suggests all 3 of them relocate into my townhouse for security purposes. I have 4 rules and 1 flooded parlor, and neither includes royal roommates. So they do something worse. Within 2 days, every building on my street acquires a new tenant. Thorn takes the tall house on the left, with a clean view of my front door. Bastian takes the one behind, with a view of every window. Reese takes the pretty one across the street and hangs curtains, which is somehow the most threatening move of all. I stand in the road, survey my new perimeter, and name it royal stalking with property taxes. Reese waves from his balcony. I do not wave back. My hand does something that is legally not a wave. Since I can't remove them, I regulate them. I write the rules on the wall by my door where nobody can claim they missed them. No alpha commands. Ever. No entering without spoken permission. No touching any object before I inspect it. Because half the things in this conspiracy bite. And under no circumstance does anyone refer to me as their Omega. Reese signs it with a flourish. Bastian signs beneath, small and neat. Thorn stares at Rule 1 for a long moment. And I watch a man renegotiate his entire upbringing before he finally signs. Then I put my new kingdom to work. Because a good investigator uses the tools available. And my tools happen to be 3 overpowered princes with guilt complexes. Thorn gets the royal treasury records, since he can requisition documents no one else can touch. Bastian gets the military transport logs, the numbers I found beside the stolen children's names. Reese gets the diplomatic channels, foreign donations, adoption charities with suspiciously beautiful paperwork. I take the objects, because objects don't lie. They just charge me for the truth. The ceremonial collar comes first, borrowed from an Ashworth storage vault through channels Thorn refuses to explain. The threads pull me into darkness that smells of straw and fear. Omega children, drugged and swaying, packed into a covered wagon. A soldier holding a lantern and looking away on purpose. I surface shaking, and the name of my 3rd-grade teacher is gone from my head. Wiped clean. The treasury stamp comes next. O'Dalis's gloved hand pressing seals onto payments routed to the late king. Year after year. Decades of gold buying, decades of silence. Then a diplomatic invitation with Reese's name inked in gold, and beneath the flattery, the truth. His famous engagement to a foreign noble was arranged for exactly one purpose: to keep him traveling far from the capital during every inheritance hearing that mattered. Someone built that man's entire love life as a distraction. Somewhere in the middle of the horror, life insists on continuing. Reese drifts into my kitchen one evening while I'm cooking and starts stealing vegetables faster than I can chop them. Between thefts, his smile slips, and the honesty underneath comes out quiet. Years ago, at a banquet, He mocked Ren in front of the whole court. Han doesn't remember what he said. He remembers the laughter, and how everyone praised his wit afterward, and how good the approval felt. Han looks at me like a man hoping to be told it was fine. I hand him an onion and tell him it wasn't fine, and that he can sit with that while he chops. He chops. He stays anyway. Some apologies start out as chores. The other two speak in different languages entirely. I come home to find my broken staircase rebuilt every board level, every nail sunk clean and bastion across the street, pretending to oil a sword. Han never mentions it. Books begin arriving on my table. Dense legal volumes with passages marked in precise ink. Everyone a statute protecting my ownership rights, my tenancy, my personhood. Thorn never mentions those either. None of them asks for thanks. I notice that I've started listening for their footsteps, that my shoulders drop half an inch when Bastion is nearby, that Reese made me laugh twice on the worst day this body has had, that I argued with Thorn for an hour about contract law and enjoyed every minute of it, which I resent deeply. I catch myself, more than once, leaving the kitchen window unlatched on purpose, telling myself it's for ventilation, knowing perfectly well which of the three prefers to come in that way. A man who spent 7 years auditing liars for a living should recognize his own excuses faster than this. I don't. I let the window stay open. The jealousy arrives on quiet feet. Thorn watches Bastion carry me after a vision knocks me flat, and his scent sharpens like a blade being drawn slowly. Reese goes actually silent when I praise Thorn's legal reasoning at dinner. Bastion sees both reactions, files them away behind calm eyes, and says nothing, which worries me most of all. The evidence keeps growing teeth. On-account chain links the Ashworths to 11 other noble families, all running the same pattern. Adopted heirs raised in public, biological heirs erased in private. One missing Omega, recorded dead 15 years ago, signed a bank transfer 8 days ago with a living hand. In a sealed drawer of Odalis's correspondence, I find a document dated 2 months before Ren collapsed in that abandoned wing. His death certificate prepared, stamped, and waiting. They scheduled him like an appointment. I'm cataloging pages after midnight when the last folder gives up its secret. A single sheet of modern paper, entirely wrong for this world, filled with typed figures in a format I'd know anywhere, because I spent 7 years staring at it under fluorescent Chicago lighting. On employee record on my old firm's letterhead, my hire date, and printed at the top, clean and impossible, is Ezra Kane's employee identification number. The room goes very cold. Nobody in this world should know that number exists. Nobody in this world should know Ezra Kane exists at all. Someone here knew exactly who I was before I ever opened Ren's eyes. I hide the Chicago file before sunrise, wrapped in oilcloth, buried under the floor of the hidden room, beneath the chair that faces the wall. My hands shake the entire time. The princes are starting to look at me like I matter, and I can't predict what happens to that look if they learn the truth. That their Omega is a dead stranger wearing a borrowed body, an intruder squatting in the house of someone they once swore, under an oak tree, to protect. Fraud investigators know the first rule of exposure. It's never the crime that ruins you. It's the discovery. The ledger doesn't care about my secrets. That night, it pulls me under without asking permission. Threads winding up my arms like ivy, and delivers me into birthdays. Ren's birthdays. The same window seat. Year after year. A boy in his best clothes. Hair combed flat. Hands folded. Watching the driveway. Downstairs. A cake with his name on it sits untouched in an empty dining room. Hours pass inside minutes. The candles are never lit. Eventually, servants carry the cake away. And the boy in the window rehearses his smile for a family that isn't coming, telling himself they're busy. They're important. Next year they'll come. 7 years old. 10. 13. 16. The hope gets quieter every year. It never fully dies, which is the cruelest part. Hope was the leash. Then the final memory breaks the pattern. Ren is 19. Not even watching the driveway anymore. When the door cracks open and Corwin slips through 15 and terrified. glancing over his shoulder, carrying one stolen slice of cake on a napkin. He sets it on the window seat, whispers happy birthday, and flees before anyone can see him. Ren stares at that slice like it's the only warm thing in the building. Because it was, the threads release me and take their payment. My Chicago apartment, 6 years of my life, and the address is gone. Street name, unit number. All of it scraped clean out of my head. I sit on the floor and try to walk myself through my own front door from memory. And there is no door. And something in my chest just stops working. The jokes won't come. I reach for them and find the same smooth emptiness where the address used to be. That's how Thorne finds me shaking on the floor of a dark kitchen at 2 in the morning. Han doesn't touch me. Han doesn't command me. He lowers himself to the cold floor an arm's length away. Crown Prince of the realm. Folds his hands. And waits. Saying nothing. Going nowhere. Cedar and cold smoke settle over the room like a blanket I didn't ask for and don't refuse. When my voice finally works, I give him a version of the truth. I tell him I can feel the dead Omega's loneliness soaked into this body like water into old wood. I tell him, the worst part was never losing the inheritance. It was that they trained a child to believe love was a wage. That if he just suffered quietly enough, worked hard enough, waited long enough, IT would finally be paid. It never got paid. It was never going to be paid. The debt was designed to be permanent. Thorne listens, the way he reads contracts completely. I watch understanding move through him. Watch him finally do the math on why I flinch at ownership. Why commands make me vicious. Why the wall of rules exists. Han doesn't apologize. He just stops leaning on the doorframe of my life like he's entitled to walk in. It isn't everything. It isn't nothing. The knock comes near dawn. A delivery worker stands on my step in a uniform 2 sizes wrong. Cap yanked low over a scent of white peach and winter mint. I lean on the doorframe and tell him it's the worst disguise I've ever seen. And that I once watched a man claim $2 million in losses on a boat he never owned. Corwin's famous composure cracks straight down the middle. He gets inside and comes apart at my table. And the truth pours out of him in pieces. He's known for years that Ren is the true heir. I never wanted the position. But every time he tried to speak, O'Daly's made the same quiet promise that she'd have. Ren declared unstable and committed to a private Omega institution. Bureau'd alive behind clean white walls. Forever. Being the perfect fake heir was the price of keeping Ren visible. Keeping him alive. And somewhere in those years, Corwin says, hating himself, he grew resentful. Because saving Ren required becoming the very thing Ren hated. Playing the villain, honestly, is still playing the villain. I don't forgive him. I tell him instead that I can see exactly what the protection cost him. And I can see just as clearly what his coldness cost the boy at that window, and neither fact cancels the other out. He nods slowly, like a man who expected a harsher verdict and is still deciding, carefully, whether to trust the lighter one he's just been given. Then he sets a small iron key on my table. O'Daly's private archive. Everything is in there, he says, and then he tells me the rest. And the floor drops out of the world. The ceremony was never designed to choose an heir. It was designed to confirm which Omega would be sacrificed. The vault requires both of us, the false heir and the blood heir. O'Daly's had planned for me to refuse the surrender in front of everyone. My refusal was supposed to be the ritual trigger. But I signed willingly, and that changed the mechanism entirely. Corwin's voice shakes when he finishes. The vault will no longer settle for just the 2 of us. When it opens, it will drain every Omega bound to the Ashworth Inheritance Network. All of them. 4 days left. 4 days becomes a countdown. And we spend the first one breaking into my grandmother's private archive like polite criminals. Corwin's iron key turns in a door hidden behind a chapel wall. And the 5 of us descend into a room that smells of dust and old decisions. I take one look at the endless shelves, every folder labeled in O'Daly's perfect handwriting, and announce that evil should never be this organized. Nobody laughs. 10 minutes later, I understand why. I've stopped joking too. The files go back 30 years. 30 years of the same machine running on schedule, biological Omega heirs identified across the realm, then quietly discredited, called unstable, called unfit. starved of affection until they were desperate or broken or gone. Adopted heirs installed in their place, trained and polished into the public faces of stolen fortunes. The true heirs kept hidden like spare keys, because their blood opened the old family vaults where the real wealth slept. 11 noble houses, dozens of children. Some moved across borders under sedation, in military wagons, sold into the dark between kingdoms. Bastian finds his own seal first, his official stamp, pressed onto transport orders authorizing those wagons. The forgery is excellent, but that isn't what makes his hands curl into fists. He remembers the irregular passenger lists that crossed his desk. He remembers signing off without asking, because the paperwork looked clean and questions slow down a career. Thorn finds worse in his own father's hand, treasury records showing the late king accepting Odalis's gold for decades, financing the network to steady the kingdom's economy. Silence. Purchased at the price of children. Rhys reads his engagement contract last, and his charm dies quietly on his face. Because the marriage was Odalis's design from the very first, signature foreign protection secured, and the realm's most curious prince kept traveling. Always elsewhere, always smiling somewhere far from the truth. The three of them stand there drowning in it. Princes discovering their crowns were bricks in the wall. I give them exactly 1 minute. Then I tell them that guilt is the most useless currency in the world unless it converts into action. And that right now I need auditors, not mourners. I mean it as a command. And it lands like one. But underneath the sharp edge of it, I feel something I don't say out loud, that I recognize this particular flavor of grief, the kind that arrives 20 years too late to fix anything and just sits there, heavy and useless, demanding to be felt anyway. I gave myself exactly 1 minute of it too, back in a Chicago hallway once, over a case I hadn't caught in time. Then I went back to work, because work was the only apology available. I'm handing these three men the same trade. It isn't kindness. It's the only mercy I know how to give. Thorn's spine straightens first. Then the confessions turn sideways into something raw. Rhys admits, staring at the floor, that he hates how easily I lean into Bastian's protection. Bastian answers that he envies how my mind sharpens whenever I argue with Thorn. Thorn says nothing at all, but his scent turns dark and possessive as smoke filling a closed room. I set down my folder and warn all three of them that jealousy will not turn me into a trophy, and that I'm nobody's prize at the bottom of anyone's box. 3 grown alphas study their own boots like scolded choir boys. That's when the lanterns die. Masked guards pour through the archive door, blades low, moving with trained purpose, and the purpose is us. Bastian becomes a wall in front of Corwin and me, and I finally understand why armies obey him. He fights like architecture. Unmovable. Exact. Thorn sweeps the critical files into a case with a lawyer's sense of priority. Rhys drops his grin, disarms a man with a candlestick, then freezes half a breath, because he recognizes the attacker's wrist guard. Diplomatic issue. One of his own aides. A blade skids across the stones to my feet, and my curiosity has never once let me stay safe. I press my palm to the steel. The threads erupt. Odalis's voice fills my skull, calm as arithmetic, instructing the guard captain. Kill the false heir. The blood heir must not be damaged. Preserve him whole. Then the vision lurches somewhere impossible. Fluorescent light, humming cables, a Chicago parking structure at night, and a man kneeling on the stairwell landing, wearing an Ashworth signet ring, working a wrench against the bolts of the top handrail until the whole fixture hangs by nothing. 3 minutes before Ezra Kane takes those stairs 2 at a time, the way he always did, and finds out too late that the railing isn't there to catch him anymore. My death was scheduled, like everything else in this family. It was never an accident. I was harvested. I surface screaming, and the fight is over. Guards fled or down, and there's blood soaking through Bastian's sleeve, his blood, taken defending me. I steer him into a chair and clean the wound while my hands pretend to be steady. The room narrows to just the two of us. Leather and warm iron wrap around honey and lime until the air feels thick enough to lean on. I hold still under my fingers, this enormous, patient mountain, letting me direct every touch. Dominance expressed as stillness. My thumb rests against his jaw. His breath changes. The distance between our mouths becomes a decision, and I watch him refuse to make it for me. I want to close it. I want it with a force that terrifies me. Fear wins. I pull back an inch. Han simply nods no complaint. No wounded sigh and murmurs that I closed the wound well. Some men make acceptance feel like a gift. We piece the rest together past midnight. And the truth keeps getting bigger and colder. O'Dallies can reach my old world. My death was arranged, which means my arrival here was arranged too. When Corwin cross-references the vault texts, the mechanism finally shows its teeth. The vault didn't take me by luck. It selected me, searched across worlds for a soul with exactly my training. A mind built to follow money through walls, because the vault needs a reader to be fully unlocked. My fraud experience isn't my weapon. It's my qualification. I'm not the investigator in this story. I'm the crowbar. Dawn is bleeding gray through the archive door when the messenger hawk arrives. Silver-banded with the Ashworth crest. Inside the tube, one elegant line in my grandmother's hand offers a trade. Corwin's freedom, guaranteed, in exchange for my voluntary return. Beneath it hangs a live magical image my mother, chained beneath the estate, mouthing my name. She made her choices, I say, and my voice sounds like a stranger renting my throat. The image trembles in my hand, my mother in chains, and I keep telling the room she built her own cell, brick by brick. Every year she called her son unstable. Then the ledger burns hot against my hip, and the threads take me without asking. My mother, 3 weeks ago, standing in O'Dallies' study with documents stolen from the family's safe, voice shaking, threatening to expose everything. Because leaving, she says, was the first thing Wren ever did that she respected. Guards take her before she reaches the door. The vision drops me back into my kitchen, and the argument I was winning against her is suddenly over. I'll go, I tell them. Not because she earned rescue, because O'Dallies doesn't get to decide what kind of man wears this face. The plan we build is a lie with perfect posture. Thorne insists the safest road into that estate is chains my chains. A public arrest convincing O'Dallies her royal opposition has collapsed. I agree, and I keep one card folded against my chest where even princes can't read it. Because a fraud investigator never enters a hostile mile audit without a hidden exit. Before dawn, they arm me with trust instead of weapons. Thorne slides his signet ring onto my finger, the one that answers only to his blood. Bastian presses his childhood knife into my palm. Worn hilt. Perfect edge. Reese folds a diplomatic coin into my hand, cool and heavy, and tells me it opens any Varith border. Anywhere in the realm. No questions asked. 3 princes handing their power to an Omega and asking for nothing back. I make a joke about pawn shops so I don't do something embarrassing, like cry. The arrest is a masterpiece, and it ruins me a little. Thorne's voice in the public square is Winter with a gavel in it, announcing my crimes of magical interference, and his eyes hold nothing at all. Even knowing the script, I feel the words land like stone. Reese stands beside my grandmother's carriage, wearing his courtier's smile, laughing at something she says, and my stomach turns traitor. Bastian chains my wrists himself, iron cold, grip colder, and the crowd drinks it in. The whole city watches 3 alphas hand their Omega to the wolf. Somewhere in the crowd, a child starts crying. Not for me, just because crowds this size frighten children. And the ordinary sound of it almost undoes the whole performance in my chest. I catch Corwin's face in the crowd, bloodless, and I can't even signal him, because the performance only works if everyone bleeds. O'Dallies receives me in the Great Hall like a hostess, not a captor arms open. Calling me her dear, returned boy. Satisfaction filling the room like perfume on a corpse. Then she pours tea and explains gently, the way you'd explain something to a child. And every sentence removes a floorboard from under me. The vault rejected the original Wren. She says, his mind was worn too thin by all those lovely years of grooming, too hollow to read the deep records. So the vault went shopping across worlds. She describes my qualifications like a recruiter forensic accounting, fraud reconstruction, pattern analysis and calls, my death in that parking structure, a transfer of employment. I ask if this world offers dental. She smiles and says she does, so enjoy the new tenant. They let me see my mother. She's chained to a wall in the underground. Dark, thinner, older. And when she sees my face, she comes apart. Apologies spilling out of her in pieces 23 years too late and genuinely meant. Both things true at once. Some of what she says is about me. Most of it, I notice, is about herself, the years she spent believing that managing appearances was the same skill as loving someone, and how long it took her to see the difference, and how she still isn't sure she sees it fully even now. I stand out of reach and tell her the truth, that I believe her regret, and that belief and absolution are different rooms. And I'm not opening the second one tonight. She nods through tears like a woman accepting a fair bill. It isn't forgiveness. It's arithmetic with mercy folded into it. Then the night collapses. Alarms. Torchlight. Shouting guards drag Corwin and bleeding from the temple, caught in the lower cells trying to free the stolen Omega children. Brave and doomed, O'Daly sighs like a disappointed teacher and decides the schedule moves up. The chamber they bring us to is older than the house, standing above it, stone ribs and silver veins. And my chains suddenly wake. Cold light crawling up the links. I feel it begin. A slow pull under my skin. My scent thinning. And then worse. A small memory tearing loose. Gone. I can't even name what I lost. Only the shape of the hole it left. The chains flare gold. Thorn's ring answers on my finger. And the trap inside the trap springs, royal conduits blooming through the ironwork. The prince's power flooding toward me exactly as planned. The arrest revealed as choreography. For one whole heartbeat. We're winning. Then O'Daly laughs, soft and unhurried, and says, "The boys were always so predictable." The silver veins in the walls reverse. The conduits scream. Sever. Die. Beyond the chamber door, I hear 3 alphas hit sealed stone. Bastion's shoulder booming against it like a siege ram. The door doesn't care. She anticipated everything. We walked my own rescue straight into her machine, through the chaos. A voice reaches me that has no throat, small and young and unbearably tired, racing through the threads themselves. Ren, the original, not gone, present, folded into the echo like a pressed flower, whispering that he's still here, that he's been watching me wear his life gently, and that the power I keep spending isn't free. Every vision, every thread I pull, feeds the vault. I've been fueling the weapon since the day I touched the ledger. O'Daly steps close, tilts my chin up with one gloved finger, and delivers the final requirement like a lullaby. The vault completes only through willing choice. One name must be surrendered, forever fed to the deep records, erased from every world. Ezra Kane or Ren Ashworth. Choose. No. I tell her, and the word comes out laughing. Actually laughing. Because, after everything, my grandmother built her doomsday machine on a multiple-choice question written by cowards. She blinks. I say it again. Clearer. No. I refuse the premise. Fraud runs on forced choices. 2 doors. Both rigged. Pick your ruin. The whole trick collapses the moment somebody checks for a 3rd door. So I stop fighting the chains, close my eyes, and do the one thing nobody in this room expects from a man being drained alive. I reach into the vault on purpose. The threads swallow me whole. I fall through silver and gold into a memory with walls. And standing in the middle of it is a boy with my face thinner, softer, tired in a way sleep never fixes. Ren Ashworth. The original. I brace for rage, for grief, for the rightful owner demanding his body back. Instead, he looks at me the way you look at rain after a drought, and says the words that rearrange my entire understanding of this story. He chose me, dying in that abandoned wing, hollowed out and finished. He didn't just fade. He reached through the echo, through the walls between worlds, searching for a mind sharp enough and stubborn enough to finish what he couldn't. O'Daly believes the vault harvested me. The vault only carried the call. The call was his. Then he shows me the rest, and my knees nearly give inside the vision. The window seat boy was cataloging everything the whole time, names memorized from overheard meetings, documents copied out in a child's careful hand and hidden inside walls, 23 birthday cards sealed and stored, each envelope holding evidence behind the greeting. His obedience was camouflage. I was the first investigator on this case, and he worked it alone for 2 decades. I ask him what he wants, because everyone deserves that question once, not erasure. He says, not victory over me. Coexistence his memories. My training. One life carried by 2 names, neither erasing the other. It mirrors Corwin and me so perfectly I could laugh. 2 Omegas taught to fight over one identity while the real thief watched from a distance. We agree without ceremony. His memories fold into mine like a hand into a hand. I surface from the vault changed. The echo no longer dragging at me, answering me instead. And Adali sees it in my eyes and steps backward for the first time in her elegant life. Then the wall explodes. Bastian comes through the sealed doorframe first, stone dust on his shoulders, having apparently negotiated with the architecture until it gave up. Thorne and Reese follow through the breach, and behind them, in chains, she somehow turned into a procession. Walks, my mother shouting to the household gathered above, that everything is true. Her own guilt first. The neglect, the conditioning, the network, confessing her titles away in front of witnesses, trading her whole social existence for one clean act. She presses a folded document into my hand as guards pull her back evidence in her own handwriting, and I take it. And I still do not absolve her. And she nods like she's finally understood the difference between payment and gift. The ceiling groans. The corridor splits, dropping stone between us. And suddenly, it's just Thorne and me alone in a collapsing archive hall. Dust falling like gray snow. And there, with the world coming down, the Ice Prince finally melts. "I wants me," he says, plainly no command in it. And in the same breath, he says the sentence I never expected from an alpha's mouth, that wanting me gives him no right to me. Then he lists his failures like charges filed against himself. Unbelieved the family's reports without checking. He commanded when he should have asked. I treated me like a mystery to solve and own. I let instinct make him possessive and called it protection. Each admission costs him visibly, and he pays without flinching. So I pay too. I tell him the truth. I've been hiding behind every joke that I want him. Want Bastian. Want Reese. All 3. So much it feels like standing on a ledge, that their scents make me feel safe. And safety terrifies me. Because every person who ever claimed this body invoiced it afterward. Loving them means handing over the knife and trusting them not to use it. And I've never once seen that bet pay out. Han doesn't argue. Han steps close, slowly, cups my face in both hands like I'm something recovered from a fire. Han asks permission to kiss me. I give it, out loud. The first touch of his mouth is barely there. A question shaped like a kiss, and he holds absolutely still, waiting, letting the next move be mine. I take his collar into both fists and pull him in. Restraint breaks on both sides at once. Cedar and smoke flood into honey and lime until the ruined corridor smells like something being decided. We separate, breathing badly. Bastian and Reese find us 30 seconds later. Take one look. And Reese opens his mouth to be hilarious and closes it again. Because even he can read a sacred thing. I tell all 3 of them, clearly, that one kiss decides nothing about 4 people. That this gets negotiated, not assumed. They accept it without a single protest. And something in my chest unclenches for the first time in 2 lifetimes. It isn't relief. Exactly. It's closer to the feeling of finally putting down a bag. I didn't realize I'd been carrying with both arms locked. 2 lifetimes of people who took without asking. And here are 3 men standing in the dust of a collapsing building, waiting for permission they didn't have to request. I don't know yet what to do with that. I decide I don't have to know tonight. Then Thorne's ring flares against my finger. And then the vault answers it, the deep records opening one file on their own. His father's final confession, sealed in gold. We read it together in the dust. The royal family never created the network. They were paying tribute to it, to an organization that's been operating for decades. Out of my world. Out of modern-day Chicago. O'Dalley's doesn't wait for us to recover. The floor lights up beneath the entire estate. Silver gold veins spreading outward like a map catching fire. And somewhere above us, she stands at the vault's heart, driving it to full power before our evidence can leave the building. The pull hits instantly. Across the whole realm, every Omega bound to the Ashworth network staggers where they stand. In kitchens, in fields, in fine parlors, knees buckling as the vault begins to drink. Thorn grabs my shoulder and offers the obvious answer, royal blood. All three princes overpowering the vault by force, their strength flooding through me. I refuse it out loud with the building shaking around us. Three powerful men seizing control to save the helpless is exactly the machine we came here to burn. I will not defeat this system by demonstrating it. Instead, I assign the work, because I am. In every world, an auditor with a clipboard where my fear should be. Thorn takes the royal courts, opening the sealed records under his own authority, making the evidence legal before it's even public. Bastion takes the cells, evacuating the imprisoned Omega children and arresting his own collaborating officers with his own hands. Reese takes the mirrors, the diplomatic network of enchanted glass, hanging in every noble house, turning the kingdom's gossip system into a broadcast tower. Corwin looks at me, understands before I ask, and walks willingly into the second blood key position, the false heir choosing his place beside the true one. And the vault, built to feed on our rivalry, hesitates at our cooperation, like a lock meeting the wrong key. Then I go to work inside the storm. The ancestral echo, now fully answered, meets 7 years of forensic accounting. I do what I've done my whole life. I follow the money. Except now, I follow it through the objects that authorized it. Every seal, every ledger, every signet ring in the deep records becomes a witness. I trace stolen estates backward, transaction by transaction, name by name, decade by decade, building the case in light above the vault floor. And it costs. Chicago starts leaving me in pieces. My first office, my college roommates laugh, the taste of coffee from the cart outside my old building. Each loss registers the same way physically, a hot needle behind the eyes. A half-second of white noise, but they don't feel the same. Losing the roommate's laugh feels like losing a person. Losing the coffee cart feels almost merciful, a small, mundane thing the world can spare. I stop being able to tell which losses I'm choosing to trade and which ones the vault is simply taking. And somewhere in that blur, I understand, distantly, that this is probably how it felt for Ren too, grief arriving faster than the ability to sort it. Odalise watches my nose bleed and my memories burn, and her smile widens. Because she's winning the only race she cares about, emptying Ezra Kane faster than Ezra Kane can finish the audit. The world grays out. I go down. I hear her heels approach across the glowing floor. Hear her announce to the chamber, to the gathered guards, to the kingdom listening through Reese's mirrors, that the biological heir is finally empty enough to be useful. She tells them the vault will now complete, and the Ashworth name will stand cleansed and eternal. She reaches down and lifts my chin to display her victory. My eyes open, and I smile at her with 2 lifetimes behind it. Because she's emptied the wrong man. Every Chicago memory the vault took. The merge replaced with Ren's 23 years of hidden evidence. Memorized meetings. Copied documents. Names and dates stored behind a window seat smile. She burned the investigator and uncovered the witness. I rise with Ezra's method and Ren's material. I place both palms flat on the vault's core. And instead of fighting the machine, I run it. Full projection every record. Every memory. Every crime poured through Reese's mirrors into every noble house. Every square. Every barracks in the realm. All at once. The kingdom watches 30 years of truth unfold in 10 minutes. The illegal adoptions. The discredited heirs. The children in the wagons. The forced confinements. O'Dallas's voice ordering Corwin threatened. My parents signing the conditioning plan for their own son. The late king accepting tribute. And last, fluorescent and impossible, Aemon wearing an Ashworth signet ring, kneeling in a stairwell in another world, arranging Ezra Kane's death to schedule his rebirth. The vault, built to hide everything, becomes the largest confession in history. O'Dallas breaks. She snatches a blade from a stunned guard and lunges not at me, at Corwin, determined to kill the one heir she never managed to fully own. I'm faster, because Bastion's knife has been in my sleeve since the arrest. I catch her blade, turn it, and put her on the glowing floor with her own momentum. The chamber holds its breath, waiting for the execution. the clean revenge ending. I lower the knife. Death is a mercy she hasn't earned. Instead, I speak her sentence into the mirrors, every stolen asset stripped and returned, every title dissolved, and a public trial where her judges will be the survivors themselves, the grown children of the wagons, facing her one by one. She starts screaming somewhere around the word trial. Mercy, it turns out, can be the heavier sentence. The princes finish it clean. Thorne dissolves the royal protection shielding the Ashworth estate, then publishes his own father's confession. Edited. Bastian arrests officers he trained, standing at attention while they curse him. Rhys ends his engagement in front of every mirror in the kingdom and releases the foreign records with it. Then, in the wreckage, the three of them come to me carrying documents, and I brace for claims. For bonds. For the invoice. Instead, they hand me every royal writ and blood bond connecting the Valen crown to my body. Thorne sets them in my hands and says, "They're yours to burn. Complete freedom first. Courtship only if I choose it." After I survive the night, mostly my Chicago mother's face is gone, and I sit with that hole and let it hurt. Then, across the room, the second ancestral ledger opens itself. On the page, a photograph develops slowly. Ezra Kane. Outside his Chicago office. An ordinary morning. Coffee in hand. Behind him in the crowd, someone is wearing Odalis's family ring. 6 weeks later, somebody knocks on my door with cake, and I let all three of them in. Because that's the rule now. And the rules are finally mine. The townhouse smells like fresh lumber and lemon polish. The sign above the door reads Ashworth and Kane Investigations. Both names, both lives. And clients already climb my rebuilt staircase, Omegas mostly, holding old documents and older wounds, asking me to follow the money their families buried. Corwin works 3 streets over, in an office the Crown funds but doesn't control, tracing stolen children back to their birth records, returning names the network erased. Honey and I have lunch on Thursdays. It isn't brotherhood yet. It's 2 men rebuilding a bridge, one honest plank at a time. And some weeks we just argue about soup. And that's its own kind of healing. Last week he brought me a case file of his own, a boy, 7 years old, who doesn't remember his real name yet, only that his adoptive family calls him unlucky. Corwin asked me how to tell a child something true without breaking him in the process. I didn't have a clean answer. Neither of us has ever had one. We sat with the question instead of solving it, which, it turns out, is most of what healing actually looks like. The estate stands empty. I never went back. My parents lost their titles in the trials. My mother writes to the survivors weekly, funding searches, testifying without being summoned, cooperating like a woman doing penance by the pound. She writes to me too. I read every letter. I answer some. Forgiveness isn't a debt she can bill me for. And she's finally stopped trying, which is the only reason the door stays open a crack. The courtship agreement hangs framed in my kitchen, negotiated over 2 loud evenings and signed by 4 people. No alpha commands. Ever. No entering without invitation. No public claims of ownership. No calling me their Omega to reporters, nobles, or impressed bakers. Jealousy gets discussed at the table like adults, not acted out like weather. Any of the 4 of us can stop any touch at any moment. No explanation owed. And cake is mandatory during all serious negotiations, a clause Rhys fought to include. And I pretended to resist. They court me like 3 different languages saying the same word. Thorne arrives with legal reform drafts and argues statute with me until midnight. And losing an argument to me makes his scent go warm, which I exploit shamelessly. Bastian rebuilt my entire 2nd floor without being asked and cooks for me twice a week with the confidence of a general and the results of a minor catastrophe. And I eat every terrible bite because the mountain of a man blushes when I ask for seconds. Rhys handles my office's public noise, charming reporters away from my clients. And he's learned the rarest skill of his life, the silence that sits beside someone instead of performing for them. Hun jokes less around me now. High means more. Tonight I invite all 3 upstairs. My choice. My room. My word. They enter quietly. And the air changes cedar and smoke, leather and iron, amber and orange. 3 cents wrapping around mine until the room feels like a held breath. Thorn stops at the foot of the bed and asks if I'm certain. Bastion reminds me, voice low, that one word from me stops everything. Always. Reese says nothing at all, just lets the mask fall and waits with his whole heart on his face. And I choose, not because instinct drags me, not because anyone claimed me, but because real surrender only exists where refusal is safe. And for the first time in either of my lives, refusal is safe. Thorn steadies me. Bastion shelters me. Reese keeps me laughing when my eyes burn. Their strength surrounds me without once pressing down. Dominance turned into shelter, and I let their sense mark me. Deep and lasting. While the permanent bond waits for a day, I actually choose it. Near dawn. Tangled and warm. Reese whispers that he never knew closeness could leave a person free. Nobody in the bed disagrees. One of us cries a little, and I will never confirm which one. Here's what I know now. At the end and at the beginning, inheritance was never just money. People hand down beliefs, wounds, silences whole systems wrapped in a family name and called love. Nobody controls what gets passed to them. Everybody controls what they pass on. Titles mean nothing without care. Forgiveness is a gift, never a bill. Mercy is strongest when it protects the harmed instead of rescuing the guilty from consequences. And love only counts when the person being loved stays free to leave. Because a door that cannot open is just a wall with better manners. The princes sleep. I don't. Quite. Across the room, the second ancestral ledger breathes itself open, and ink rises through the page in clean, modern English. Ezra Kane was not the first investigator to die for this family. I sit up. A second line surfaces beneath it. I was the first one they failed to erase. Then the page turns liquid, silver gold, and resolves into a live image fluorescent light. Humming vents. My old Chicago office at night. A figure sits at my desk, in my chair, reading my case files. The figure stops, turns toward the ledger's viewpoint, toward me, across two worlds. It has my face, Ezra Kane's face, wearing my old smile like a rented suit. Apparently, I left a body behind, and something else has learned how to use it. That story is coming, and I intend to audit whatever is sitting in my chair. Whoever they are, they should know. I've survived one family's entire filing system of lies. A stranger in a rented smile is not going to be the thing that finally slows me down. I lie back down between three sleeping alphas who handed me their power and asked for nothing back. And I let myself feel, for one more minute, exactly how far I've come from a Chicago parking structure. Whoever is wearing my old face hasn't met the version of me this family accidentally built. They will. I close my eyes. And, for the very first time since I woke up in a stranger's skin, I fall asleep without doing the math on how much any of it will cost me. If any part of Ren's story hit close to home, drop it in the comments. We genuinely read every one of them. Tell us where you'd have signed, where you'd have fought, or which prince you're already rooting for. Your comments are what tell us which stories to tell next. So don't be shy.